Hello and welcome back to Rhonda Says, Healthy Living from A to Z. We are on chapter N today, no equipment required. No equipment, no excuses. So if you have a body, you can work out. You do not need a gym, you do not need equipment, and we're going to show you a few things. You can Google things. The thing about Googling is you want to make sure that it's safe. So if you look at something and go, I don't know about that, then maybe you shouldn't try it. But we're going to show you just a few things. I want to keep you in that whole mindset of 3 circuits, 3 exercises, 3 times. So at this point, you have foam rolled, you have warmed up, you have done some correctives, so your body is ready to go. We're going to do 3 circuits, 3 exercises. You'll do them 3 times. We're just going to demonstrate them. Now, this is the next level of your training. I want you to start thinking about joint actions. And if you think about the joint stability that we've talked about, if you think about the corrective work that we've talked about, then you already know what I'm talking about. Joint actions, the movement of the joints, and planes of motion. So we are a very sagittal society. We sit, we stand, we walk. Everything's in the sagittal plane. And probably a lot of your favorite exercises and the things that you've been doing up to this point have been in the sagittal plane. So we want you to start thinking about outside that plane. So as I said, sagittal plane is flexion and extension. It's things that look sort of like this. We also need you to get into the frontal plane. Now, if you play tennis, you're in the frontal plane a lot, but most of us aren't in the frontal plane nearly enough. So frontal plane is like this. So it's things that are going side to side. And then transverse plane is rotation. So if I'm rotating at the shoulder, so like if I'm doing a push-up, then there's rotation at the shoulder. So I'm in that transverse plane. We want you doing all of these movements. We're going to go through some quick ones. I'm going to have my team back here to demonstrate, and I will talk you through it. So the first one we're going to do is a lower body exercise that is knee dominant in the sagittal plane. It's a squat. Basic squat with absolutely no equipment. Who's doing the squat for me today? All right, come on in, Hannah. So the way that you can tell if you're in the right position is the positioning of your midsole. If you were to put a stick from her midsole to her armpit, it should be a straight line. That's how you know that you're positioned properly. If you have knee pain, it's okay to shift the toes out slightly, but you still want that big toe facing forward. So if you shift your toes not quite that far, right there, that should be enough to take pressure off of your knees. Go ahead and pull your toes forward. Even though her toes are forward, when she does her squat, her knees are going to press out towards the 4th and 5th toe. This is activating the glutes. And what do we talk about all the time? Glutes, baby. All right, so we're going to have her to do a squat. I'm going to have her to keep her hands right where they are. She's going to sit back into a perfect squat. Knees are slightly positioning out, and then she's going to stand up. Okay, do that again. And push up. So as you can see, she is getting sort of a glute dominant squat. I want to show you what a knee dominant squat would look like and what we don't want you doing. Can you do a knee dominant squat where your knees are coming forward? So if your knees are translating forward over your toes, that's going to really hurt your knees. So just go ahead and come up. I don't want to even keep her in that position that long. And once again, she sits back really far, and she's got these long legs, so she has a long femur. So if you can turn sideways, I just want to demonstrate. I want to show them something. If you have a long femur, if your thigh is long, then sometimes it can be very difficult for you to actually do a squat properly because you really have to push your hips back. And that's for Hannah. If Hannah doesn't push her hips back, her knees are going to come way too far forward. So go ahead and do a squat for me. So you can see from her knee to her hip how long her leg is and how far she has to push her hips back in order to get that position. So just pay attention to those things. When you do a squat, it should not hurt your knees. It should not hurt your knees. You should feel your glutes. Of course you're going to feel your quads, because the movements that you're doing, everything is in the sagittal plane, which means everything is doing flexion and extension. So as she goes back into her squat, everything is flexed. She's doing flexion in the hip, flexion in the knee, and dorsiflexion in the ankle, and then she's coming up out of it into full extension. So don't hurt your knees, but get your squats in, because it is a good, no equipment required exercise. Next, we're going to do a push-up, which we're going to do in the transverse plane. If you're doing a tricep push-up, where your elbows are back like this, you're back in the sagittal plane, hitting those triceps. We're going to do a push-up in the 45-degree angle. No flared out elbows, people. Don't want to see this. Pull them in. Stabilize the shoulders. Now, the cool thing about a push-up is you're working, if you're doing them properly, you're working every exercise in your, every muscle in your body, if you're doing them properly. And I'm going to show you that. Mike, are you doing our push-up? So I'm going to have him to be sideways so that we can watch some things. Go ahead and get all the way down. I'm going to have him push up from the floor. The first thing I want you to look at is where his hands are. A lot of times people have their hands too far up. So move your hands up towards your head. If you're trying to push up from there, it's going to automatically flare your elbows out. That's not what we want. Now take your hands out to the side. Yeah, that's what most people do when they're trying to do a push-up. Way too much stress on the anterior deltoid. Pull those arms in, pull the hands in, pull them down. Notice his elbows are at about a 45-degree from his body. That is the perfect form. Now, his feet are separated a little bit, but if you notice, everything in his legs, butt, and back are tight. So his entire posterior chain is firing. You want that. Also, the core, your abdominal corrections that we did for the transverse abdominis, has to be on point for this to really work. The other thing, shoulders and hips need to come up and down at the exact same time. Head is in neutral, no looking up, no dropping it down. Keep it neutral. All right, Mike, go ahead and push up for us. Straight, perfect. Come down. Notice the scapula is stable. There's no moving around in the scapula. Everything comes up. Go ahead. Boom. And everything comes down. Perfect. That's what you want it to look like. All right, so we're going to move to a core movement, and we're going to do a side plank with an elbow to the knee. And I think, Karen, are you doing this one for us? I'm going to have you turn sideways so that you can see the camera straight on. Now, this is important. Stacking the joints. I've said it time and time again. When she pulls up, she's going to pull up so that the shoulder is stacked directly over her elbow, and then all of these muscles are stacked. So her hips are straight up, shoulder is in line with the hips, which is in line with the knee, which is in line with the ankles. All of her bottom part of her body is kind of pushing down as everything else is driving up. Go ahead. Ta-da! Now, this is a little bit more advanced. So if you want to work up to this, but you don't quite feel like you're ready for that, just do a side plank. So I'm gonna have her to come up, and notice she puts her hand on her hips and her elbow is in alignment. Everything from here is in alignment. Her scapula and her back is tight, and she can take this hand up to the sky if she wants to, just as a reminder to pull everything up towards the ceiling. If she wants to kind of practice that one motion, she can pull it over her head just to get that stretched out motion that she's going to need when she brings it back. So that is 3 exercises, no equipment required. That is your first circuit. You're done. You do that 3 times, then you move on to the second circuit. So for the second circuit, we are doing a lateral lunge. Hannah? In a couple of weeks or in a couple of chapters, you're going to see us do this again. because this is one of the things I see done incorrectly most of the time, because people once again want to get too far into this knee like that. You don't want that. That is going to destroy your knee. It's going to hurt. You're not going to want to do it. So once again, we're using the girl with the really long legs and the long femur to demonstrate that you can do this properly. She's pushing her hips way back, which keeps her knee stacked over her ankle. Perfect. She's not moving through her lumbar spine. She's hinging at the hip. So you can see that her body has to come forward some because of the length here. But she's coming forward from the hip joint, not the lumbar spine. That is key. So of course you're going to do both sides. Now you can do it stationary to where you're going to go from side and then just come up and go to the other side without moving your feet. You can do them this way, stationary. If you feel like that's even too much, put your hands right in where your hips are going to bend. Then as you come down, that can kind of cue you as to where those hips need to go. They need to come back at a diagonal. When you get really good at that, you can bring your feet together and then actually step into a lateral lunge, pushing those hips way back and then come all the way back. So you can progress this. You can progress it with weight if you get really comfortable with it. At some point you can use the weight. So now we have another lateral movement. So you're in the frontal plane. So if we go back to that first circuit, what did we have? We had movements that were in the transverse plane. We had movements that were in the sagittal plane. We had movements that were in the frontal plane. And you're going to see that again. This is in that frontal plane. You need to get into different planes. Thank you, Hannah. So that is your lateral lunge. Now we're going to do a side tricep press. A lot of you women especially don't like the triceps, so we're throwing this in just to show a body weight activity. You can do the tricep push-ups, but those can be very difficult for a female, especially if you're just starting out. So this one, once again, we are in perfect alignment. Everything is stacked. Notice that she has this hand wrapped up around her back. This hand is down at her chest. It's not too high up towards her head, and it's not too far down towards her stomach. She is going to push up, and if you notice, she is getting some transverse movement there. So we're hitting some of that transverse plane. And then of course you just flip it around and do it on the other side. And you can see how there's rotation in that shoulder as she's pushing up, and you want to get that elbow as straight as possible to really get the best feeling and the best, pump in that tricep. Okay, so we've done lower body, we've done upper body, and now we're going to do a plank with a shoulder tap. Mike? This is an up plank, so you're on your wrist. I know a lot of people have trouble with their wrists. I will show you a little bit of something that I learned from a yogi years ago. Everything is tight. Once again, right here, the lumbar spine needs to be stable. The abs have to be pulled up. His glutes should be firing. They need to be tight. So everything is tight. Legs are tight, glutes are tight, abs are tight, and he is just going to tap his shoulder with one side. Notice that he does not translate, he does not rotate in his hips. Show me a rotation, what most people do. Okay, so see how the hips are dropping back and forth? If you can't do it without that, go ahead and level it up again for me. It has to look like this. So if you can't do it this way, you're not ready for it, work up to it. But this is just a plank with a shoulder tap. And once again, we're sagittal in just the holding of it, but as he's pulling that arm up, we are still getting some rotation in the shoulder, so we're hitting that transverse plane in that shoulder area. So now you have two circuits. We're ready to go on to the third circuit, and we're going to do a basic glute bridge for our first circuit. Hannah, come on down. I'm going to have you to lay sideways here so that he can see what you're doing. Palms are going to be up. I'm going to show you a few different things that you can do with a glute bridge. One is just going to be a normal glute bridge. So we're going to do a hip lift. So she's lifting her hips. Now, what I want you to remember is the lumbar spine needs to be stable. So show me one where the lumbar spine destabilizes. So push way up, arching the back. Now, I don't have a problem with you getting your shoulders and your knees in a perfect diagonal. So go ahead and come up all the way, but without arching the back. Okay, so from this point, the knees are in line with the shoulder, like a diagonal. That is fine. If she lifts her hips higher, though, you're going to see this arch. We don't want that. We don't want the arch in the lower back. Okay, so she's going to do some glute bridges this way. If you want to make it harder, you can lift one leg. Now you've got one glute working. I like the palms flipped up because I like for you to really focus on everything in the lower body for that. Another way that you can do this is Gray Cook, who is a physical therapist that I follow, he has like a lock so that you pull this in, grab underneath the knee, and then you can lift with one leg. And it's really a challenge to not let that leg move from your chest. So glute bridges. It's great for the glutes, no equipment required. The next one that we're going to do is going to be a Superman. Karen? And I'm gonna show you Superman, but then I'm gonna have her to show you another way to do the Superman. So if she comes up into just a regular Superman, you're looking once again at everything in the posterior chain. We do not work the posterior chain enough. People go to the gym, they want to see the muscle, so they're working the anterior chain. We're sitting with everything curled under. You need to be working the posterior chain, the back of your body. Now, if this is too hard, or if your shoulders can't handle this, bring your arms behind you, and you're doing the same thing. You want to make sure that the tension is in your glutes and up here. It should not hurt your lower back at all. And then once you get really good at that, you can do what I call the swimming Superman, where your arms come forward. And then, so you're doing one stroke. Now she's just going to hold her legs still, and she's going to bring her arms back like she's doing a butterfly and lift up. And then you can elongate the arms so they come out straight, and you can do the same thing like that. So those are just some progressions that you can do with the Superman. And then the last one we're going to do is going to be a core. No equipment required. It is going to jack up your heart rate, so it does get some metabolic in there. Mike's going to show you how to do a beast crawl. We'll show it this way. When you get into beast pose, you have to get your hips back. So he's going to push his hips back. He's going to lift his knees slightly off the floor. Like you should be able to put like a piece of paper under his knees. That's how close he is. And then he's going to walk this. It will fire up your core, it will fire up your quads, it will fire up your shoulders. You're going to feel this everywhere, and it will also get your heart rate going. And then you can walk backwards if you want to, which makes it a little bit harder even. Great job, Mike. And there you have it. You have 3 exercises, 3 times, 3 circuits, no equipment required. There's tons of these. Now granted, working the back is a little more difficult, but you can always find things around your house that you can use. And as we showed you, even doing a Superman fires up the posterior chain. Doing the push-up, even though it's more of a chest exercise, it fires up the posterior chain. Him doing this, the beast crawl, fires up everything. So be creative, don't get frustrated, and no excuses. So until next time, journey on.